Hey everyone, welcome back to another weekly rundown. I have a cold this week, so bear with me. Today we're covering May 16th through May 22nd, 2026. This week featured continued high stakes diplomacy and pressure on Iran, with potential deals in military readiness, aggressive fraud enforcement actions, particularly in Minnesota and targeting high profile figures, advances in congressional redistricting for the 2026 midterms, and key domestic developments, including leadership changes and White House renovations. We'll cover the key facts, official statements, and outcomes in depth. Let's dive in. Iran developments remained front and center. President Trump issued repeated warnings, stating the clock is ticking and Iran must move fast or face severe consequences. He revealed the U.S. was approximately 1 hour from conducting major strikes, but paused at the request of key Gulf leaders, the Emir of Qatar, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and President of the UAE, who believed a deal was close. Trump instructed War Secretary Pete Hegseth and military leaders to prepare for a large-scale assault if needed, while expressing hope a deal could eliminate Iran's nuclear weapons capability permanently. Iran submitted additional proposals via Pakistani mediators, but U.S. officials rejected terms involving reparations, continued enrichment, Strait of Hormuz controls, or fees on shipping. Reports indicated Iran faced fuel shortages with long gas lines, while the naval blockade redirected over 80 commercial vessels and disabled 4 tankers. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent urged G7 allies to intensify sanctions on Iran's illicit finance networks, and regional allies remained active. The UAE and Saudi Arabia conducted strikes inside Iran, and Pakistan deployed troops, jets, drones, and air defenses to Saudi Arabia. A nuclear power plant fire in the UAE was attributed to an Iranian drone attack, and U.S. forces maintained high alert with airlift surges and preparations, including refuelers in Israel. Negotiations focused on a potential 30-day framework to formally end hostilities and address the nuclear program and strait access, and Trump stressed any outcome must prioritize U.S. security and no nuclear weapons for Iran. Vice President Vance emphasized the operation was not a forever war, noting the active phase lasted about 5.5 weeks, and the regime used CNN for what many call a propaganda tour, showing the training of children and locals as a call to arms. The stakes are personal as well, as a terrifying assassination plot was discovered targeting Ivanka Trump by an IRGC-trained terrorist who was caught with blueprints of her Florida home. While the military holds the line abroad, a massive war on fraud is erupting at home. Senator Joni Ernst recently exposed a staggering reality. The United States loses approximately $1.4 billion every single day to fraud. In Minnesota, federal authorities announced a massive $90 million Medicaid fraud bust with 15 defendants charged, an event that followed the 41.5-year sentence for feeding our future ringleader Amy Bach in the $250 million scandal. Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. highlighted the largest autism services fraud bust in U.S. history, where program costs exploded from $38 million to $442 million due to systemic abuse. Vance noted patterns of obstruction by Minnesota officials, including Governor Tim Walz, and referred aspects potentially linked to overseas terrorist financing for counterterrorism review. Vance announced investigations into possible criminal wrongdoing by Governors Gavin Newsom and Tim Walz for alleged negligence or complicity in fraud schemes, and Dr. Oz reported $100 billion in annual Medicare and Medicaid fraud, and a national moratorium on new hospice and home health licenses. Actions included blocking billions in suspicious funds, with 780 shuttered providers showing no pushback. Education Secretary Linda McMahon blocked fraudulent student loans involving dead individuals and bots, and additional probes targeted Representative Ilhan Omar's ties to fraud networks, including earmarks and communications in the Feeding Our Future scandal. There are now motions to pass a bill banning dual citizens from serving in Congress, which would force Omar to choose between her American and Somali citizenship. Vance emphasized equal justice, with the DOJ surging prosecutors to Minnesota and other states, and he called Nick Shirley's reporting 100% vindicated. In North Carolina, the former Affairs of Black People Committee chair was indicted for fraud, accused of embezzling campaign cash, and in Ohio, attorney Mahik Cook and credible whistleblowers uncovered a $1.2 billion health fraud scheme linked to Somalis and other migrants. Small Business Administrator Kelly Loeffler revealed the Biden administration ordered their staff to ignore the U.S. Treasury's Do Not Pay list for grants, and 70% were flagged for fraud. On to redistricting advances and election integrity efforts. Redistricting momentum built for 2026. South Carolina's House and Senate Committee advanced a 7 Republican, 0 Democrat congressional map eliminating Representative Jim Clyburn's seat, with a full floor vote pending and a special session called. Louisiana's House Committee moved forward on a map shifting to 5 Republican, 1 Democrat, and Missouri's map was upheld. Election integrity actions included RNC lawsuits in 32 states to combat cheating, DOJ probes into non-citizen voting, and Maryland's handling of over 500,000 potentially fraudulent mail-in ballots, and calls for the Save America Act. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon pushed for voter roll access in California and Oregon, and an election fraudster exposed by James O'Keefe in California pleaded guilty to her crimes and faces years in prison. Shifting to immigration enforcement, the Trump administration has ordered all non-citizens applying for a green card to leave the United States and wait for processing outside the country, regardless of family ties. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin has confirmed a grim statistic. Roughly 50% of murders in Fairfax County, Virginia, are committed by illegal aliens. In response, Representative Brandon Gill is moving to defund Fairfax County. ICE is surging into New York City and other sanctuary cities, with Border Czar Tom Homan promising to arrest the bad guy in the street, regardless of opposition from local governors. Elsewhere, Customs and Border Patrol agents had to use disabling fire to stop a vessel filled with 64 illegal aliens that refused to comply. We're also seeing a crackdown on the banking system, with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent directed to ensure banks can collect immigration status and work authorization to prevent money laundering and fraud. Mexican Senator Enrique Inzunza Cazares was arrested in San Diego after conspiring with the Sinaloa cartel to import mass amounts of deadly drugs into the United States in exchange for bribes and political support, and Diego Reyes was indicted for ramming his vehicle into ICE agents during Operation Midway Blitz. Obama-appointed Judge Waverly Crenshaw is facing to be impeached by Congress after he threw out Kilmar Abrego Garcia's human trafficking indictment, and the Department of Justice is appealing this ruling as there is video evidence of the crime. Last for this topic, over 80 new immigration judges have been installed, a necessary operational improvement that helps clear dockets, deliver outcomes, and support due process for illegal aliens. Switching to D.C. renovations. In a move that reflects his background, President Trump has taken a direct role in renovating Washington, D.C. The Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, which he described as being filled with sewage and filth under previous administrations, is being rebuilt with industrial-strength materials, under budget, and ahead of schedule for the 4th of July. The broken floor of the walkway to the Oval Office has been repaired, the fountains at Meridian Hill Park are flowing again, and the Triumphal Arch was approved by the Commission of Fine Arts, a key federal commission. The most ambitious project, however, is the new White House ballroom. This isn't just a venue for parties. It's been designed with 4-inch thick glass and a roof made of steel that functions as a drone port and a shield. The complex goes 6 stories deep and includes a military hospital, research facilities, and 360-degree defense positions for snipers. Trump confirmed the ballroom above ground will look like the Supreme Court facade, and he describes it as his gift to the United States and future presidents, as he will only have a few short months to enjoy it before his term ends. Let's move on to the Anti-Weaponization Fund. President Trump dropped his $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS in exchange for a $1.776 billion compensation fund for those wrongly targeted and prosecuted by the Biden administration. The lawsuit was originally filed after a government contractor admitted to stealing the tax information of wealthy Americans, including Trump, then leaking it to media outlets in 2019 and 2020. Vice President Vance revealed Tina Peters is the type of person who could receive compensation by this fund, or even Hunter Biden, emphasizing the fund is open to anybody, Republican or Democrat. Claims would be evaluated case by case, and no money would go directly to Trump or his administration and/or family. Unfortunately, not everyone is on board with this fund. Senator Tom Tillis is moving to block it, calling it stupid on stilts, and Senate Majority Leader John Thune also voiced concerns. Now it's time for the noteworthy tidbits, which are brought to you today by Zevo Life. Let me tell you about them quick. Looking for a game-changing way to improve your health? Zevo Life is the world's most nutrient-dense whole plant, packed with over 50% plant protein, essential amino acids, fiber, and antioxidants. Harnessing the best nature has to offer, Zevo Life nourishes your body while driving your performance, vitality, and overall well-being. Each serving is a concentrated source of clean, well-balanced nutrition designed to support modern lifestyles, and just 1 teaspoon a day supports your gut, boosts energy, and promotes healthier skin and hair. It's no wonder that it's receiving rave 5-star reviews. Step into a healthier future with a 30% discount and a 30-day risk-free guarantee by visiting zivo.life and using my promo code. To support my show and to receive 30% off your entire order, enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. All right, let's get back to the tidbits. Unvaccinated service members continued receiving reinstatement and back pay. War Secretary Pete Hegseth awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, one of the highest awards in the U.S. military, to the USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group sailors after a lengthy deployment involving both the Nicolas Maduro raid and Operation Epic Fury. Senator Bill Cassidy lost his primary to Julia Letlow in Louisiana, and Andy Barr won the U.S. Senate GOP nomination in Kentucky. In defense of Christians being slaughtered by Muslims in Nigeria, the U.S. military, in conjunction with the Nigerian government, conducted strikes against ISIS-linked targets, killing an ISIS commander and 175 other Islamists. Eric Trump announced a defamation lawsuit against MS Now and Jen Psaki after Psaki accused Eric of self-dealing and shady financial activities using his father's position as president. Los Angeles mayoral candidate Spencer Pratt revealed the reservoirs are still bone dry despite it being peak fire season, and he called out current Mayor Karen Bass for spending money on drugs for the homeless, which they're busing into the city, by the way, instead of on repairs to the reservoirs. The Department of Justice obtained evidence that the 2020 election was rigged against Trump, and Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche confirmed more will be revealed as the DOJ investigation continues. The investigation is looking into the Russia hoax, as well as fraud investigations in Georgia and Arizona. Axios reported that Cuba discussed striking Florida, Guantanamo Bay, and U.S. vessels, but Cuba is denying that claim. In other Cuba news, the DOJ indicted former Cuban leader Raul Castro, the brother of Fidel Castro, in the murder of 4 American civilians in 1996. Raul, aged 94, could face the death penalty or life imprisonment. Thousands of Christians flooded the National Mall in Washington, D.C. to rededicate America to faith. The FBI carried out the extradition and arrest of 2 foreign terrorists who plotted multiple violent attacks across America, primarily on Jewish locations. The state of Florida is investigating the NFL for DEI hiring, possibly discriminating in favor of minorities. At Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Secretary Hegseth pinned the Purple Heart on 9 American heroes and re-enlisted 190 soldiers. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas swore in Kevin Warsh as Federal Reserve Chair, and President Trump praised Warsh as one of the great potential leaders in this role. Elon Musk exposed the FBI implanted 26 people into January 6th to spy for them, and the government lied that this never happened. The U.S. Senate confirmed 49 Trump nominees, including judicial nominee Sharia Atkins Clark as U.S. District Judge in South Carolina. President Trump is multiplying the number of drugs available on TrumpRx by 7 by adding in generics. As HHS Secretary Kennedy said, Bush promised to do this, Clinton promised to do this, Biden promised to do it, Obama promised to do it. President Trump actually got it done, and he called it an extraordinary accomplishment. The Trump administration is blocking foreigners and visa issuances to foreigners who have visited Congo, South Sudan, or Uganda in the past 3 weeks due to the Ebola outbreak. U.S. Attorney Judge Janine Pirro announced she's going after the parents of the teens who erupted into a brawl at a Chipotle in the D.C. Navy Yard over the weekend. And after pressure from Pirro, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser declared an emergency, calling for an 8 p.m. curfew for juveniles to prevent teen takeovers. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum confirmed oil drilling and critical mineral mining is surging in Alaska. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin revealed $1 billion to address forever chemicals in the drinking water of rural and small communities. Secretary Kennedy reorganized his agency's civil rights office to protect religion and Americans of faith in healthcare. Senator Tommy Tuberville won the primary to become the next governor of Alabama, and Scott Pressler won his election to become GOP state committeeman in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. Representative Chip Roy filed a bill to ban Islamist and Chinese communist home ownership. President Trump endorsed Ken Paxton over Senator John Cornyn in the Texas Senate primary. The Trump administration is suing California for allowing biological males to compete in female sports. First Lady Melania's Fostering the Future Act passed unanimously in the House of Representatives. President Trump delivered a commencement address at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in Connecticut, and the cadets presented Trump with a '47 football helmet. In response, Trump handed the cadet his USA hat as a trade. A deep state prosecutor involved with Jack Smith's witch hunt against Trump was criminally charged on felony counts of stealing confidential investigation documents. Representative Jim Jordan confirmed the Biden administration dropped the investigation against the Southern Poverty Law Center after the SPLC trained DOJ staff to target conservatives, and he announced the people who infiltrated January 6th may have been paid by the SPLC. Republicans won both Georgia Supreme Court races. The U.S. House passed a bill to block large institutional investors from buying up single-family homes. House DOJ Chairman Representative Tim Burchett got a bill passed through committee that ends duplicative federal programs. Representative Burchett also filed legislation to bring back hangings for the death penalty in the United States, and he also called for hangings for child predators. The U.S. House passed legislation to defund gender ideology programs in public schools. Secretary of State Marco Rubio traveled to Sweden for a NATO foreign ministers meeting and then to India to repair and strengthen strained U.S.-India relations. DHS Secretary Mullen traveled to Mexico's National Palace to meet with authorities on U.S. cooperation. The Colorado Democratic Party censured Governor Jared Polis because he freed Tina Peters. President Trump terminated the Biden administration's regulation on refrigerators and air conditioners. These regulations made refrigerators and AC units less effective and more costly for Americans. The U.S. Senate went on recess before voting on and passing the ICE-CBP reconciliation package, so they will now miss Trump's June 1st deadline. After removing 5,000 troops from Germany, President Trump is sending them to Poland. President Trump announced legislation has advanced to make daylight savings time permanent through the Sunshine Protection Act, and he demanded Congress make it a law. National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard resigned from her position effective June 30th so that she can care for her husband, who was diagnosed with an aggressive form of bone cancer. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent placed sanctions on Hezbollah-linked Lebanese officials. Representative Burchett warned the deep state is trying to cloud the UFO file release by putting out disinformation, and the U.S. military released a UFO file showing an Air Force jet shooting down an unidentified flying object. Senator Rand Paul announced that based on reporting and CIA whistleblower testimony, the CIA appears to be illegally spying on Director Gabbard's team, interfering with investigations on the COVID cover-up, the JFK, MLK, and RFK assassinations, UAPs, and more. The FBI arrested dozens of violent criminals in Illinois over 5 days as part of Operation Viper. That wraps up our recap of May 16th through 22nd. This week showed unrelenting momentum, squeezing adversaries abroad, rooting out fraud at home, and structural reforms. What stood out most to you this week? My X account is still being held prisoner by AI bots, so drop your thoughts in the comments or on Instagram at ShadesOfJadePod. If these updates are hitting the spot, subscribe, review, and share. Thank you for listening and have a great day.